Michael Brett,
Hello,
welcome to the
Cee.
Seattle podcast. Thank you
Great
for
to be
being
with you.
here.
Hi.
Woo! Okay, I'm so excited about the things we're going to be talking about because you kind of work in the Wild Wild West, is what I would like to call it, as where all the scientists are, all the researchers are. What do you do, Michael? Tell me what you
What
do.
do I do? So I work for Amazon Web Services at AWS, so in downtown Seattle, and I lead our business development team for quantum technologies at AWS. And so what that means is that I talk to customers of AWS all day, every day, and we help them get
Sounds
access
great.
to we help them get access to quantum computers, which are a really exciting new technology. It's an emerging technology, and my job is to help them understand what we're offering, get them connected to the technology that we offer, and hopefully put together deals that give them access to hopefully funding and opportunities to start to explore what quantum's all about.
Oh, okay. So what kind of AWS customers, if you were to segment them, of like what kind of specific type of businesses you usually do
Yeah,
deals
so
and work with?
most of my customers are researchers. They're at universities and national labs, and they're working on quantum science. Like they are scientists that are exploring like the physics of quantum computing or the computer science and developing algorithms and benchmarking protocols and new compilers for a new type of computer. Or they're looking at what the potential use cases are for this technology long term, like in industry. We also have a whole bunch of startups that are building on top of AWS and accessing the quantum computers that we access there. So we're helping those startups build their businesses and get access to the technology. And then the third kind of grouping of customers we have are large-scale enterprise customers that are doing their own R&D into quantum computing as a technology. So this might be like JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs or BMW or Airbus that are exploring what this technology is and what it means for them for the future. So most of it is research. Most of my customers are scientists, but we also do a lot of work with startups and sort of innovation labs inside big enterprise as well.
That's amazing. So help me understand your background when it comes, because you've been in this land for a really long time. And so help people understand more contextually how you came about on the science side, Michael, because I know you from the business side. So help
Yeah.
me understand the science side of you.
So my background's in aerospace engineering. That was my degree, and the first part of my career was all in aerospace and defense, and mostly in high performance computing in the aerospace and defense world. So I used to build software models and do simulations of rockets and missiles and drones and all sorts of fun stuff. And we would use very large scale computer systems to do modeling and simulation in the aerospace world. And it was back in 2012, I got introduced to quantum computing as sort of a very, very, very early stage technology at the time, as like, something that was being developed and could be interesting to the kind of applications that I worked on. And I happened to be doing my MBA at the time. We had to write a business plan for a startup as part of the MBA. So I wrote a business plan for a quantum computing software company as part of my capstone project or whatever. I got a B minus for that. It wasn't a very good
You
plan,
passed.
but I passed. That was the main thing. But having done like just a little bit of research into it and like got that taste of quantum computing, I kept seeing it. Like it kept building, and there were more opportunities to get involved with this technology. And so a couple of years later, some friends and we started a company that essentially picked up that old business plan, but improved on it a lot to build a quantum computing software company that would create the software layer that sat on top of these quantum computers. That company did very well. We got acquired by one of the quantum computing hardware companies in 2019. And so after that, I came to AWS and have been leading the business development team for quantum ever since. So my journey into quantum computing was kind of sideways. Like I came from the aerospace and high performance compute world, but I've been in the quantum game for about 12 years now. So it's been a blast.
Oh my goodness. So, and to be clear, you are a co-founder and
Yeah, that's right.
CEO.
So yeah, co-founder and CEO of a quantum computing software company. The company was called QBranch back in the day. It doesn't exist anymore. We sold it 5 years ago now, even longer. 6 years ago.
Congratulations.
So it feels like a little bit of ancient history, but that was a very, very formative time, a very a wonderful experience to go through with some friends, and it was a successful business.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh. And so you really, and going through that startup period as well, you would have had to go through the highs and lows and really had a good understanding of not just the industry, but what's to come. And so that kind of rightfully position you in such a great way in those 3 customer segments that you're talking about. You can speak to all of them.
Yeah, oh my God. Startup life is a roller coaster. Anyone that's been involved in startups knows that. You have the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, and they could be both happening like that morning as well. So you ride that out. It's incredibly challenging, but incredibly fun to go through that. So yeah, a lot of hard-won lessons along the way in business and entrepreneurship and working with other people and governance and all of the challenges that emerge around that. And so in my job now, I'm at a big company at AWS, so it's not quite the same roller coaster. But one of the best parts of my job is I get to work with other startups, and having had that experience and knowing what those CEOs go through, I am very empathetic and very supportive of them, and I want to do everything I can so that they can be successful on what we do, because I've been in their shoes. You need all the friends you can get, and so if AWS can help them out, then I'm happy to do so.
Oh, that's a great way of looking at it. Oh my goodness, Michael. Wait, so tell me more about the science side of it, of like when you're working together with scientists, and what is your relationship with science and the integrity of science?
Sure. So at AWS, we sell computers. We've got computers available for hire. That's what we do at AWS. So you can get access to CPUs and GPUs and other special purpose computers there. And the ones that I look after are the quantum computers. So these are very, very early stage, essentially research and development devices themselves. And scientists use this infrastructure that we provide to do experiments. So our job is to provide sort of the experimental infrastructure. And one way to think about it is it's kind of like we're renting time on a radio telescope, or we're renting time at the Large Hadron Collider. This is serious scientific equipment, and you can do really high quality experiments and to collect data from that, and then write your paper and get it published and presented and sort of advance the frontier of the science. And so our job is to make the best possible infrastructure available to those scientists and to help them out with what they need so that they use it correctly, that they're not frustrated, they're not accidentally making mistakes and having to rerun the experiment and that kind of thing. So it needs to be super high quality infrastructure, very efficient to get engaged. They can trust the experimental data that they're getting back so that it can form the basis of a paper. So a lot of my team's work is in interacting with the scientists to give them access to what they need, coach them through it, troubleshoot, and give them a good experience using this infrastructure to do that work. We occasionally will do some original science ourselves. So our teams will use our infrastructure to pursue some idea, or we might look at a particular algorithm or a particular benchmarking technique on these computers ourselves and then publish that work. But most of the time it's supporting other scientists around the world. So there'll be researchers at the university or at national labs that are getting access to these devices to pursue whatever it is that they want to do.
That's amazing. Okay, so the incubators and accelerators that's within the universities, that's also helping to support the researchers and the scientists to publish the papers. You're helping with getting them to that finish line in a way, right?
So let me give you a specific example. So at University of Washington in Seattle, they've got a program that they run for quantum information science. And so there's a master's level program at UW to take students through all of the components around building a quantum computer. So, the electronics of it, the mechanics of it, some of the physics around that. And then each year, those students do a capstone project to explore an algorithm on a quantum computer. And so AWS provides the infrastructure to those students. We give them access to these machines. We give them some coaching and some training and help them out. But it's up to them. Like, they need to run an experiment. They need to collect the data. They need to write up the results from that. And that's something that we've done with UW for the last couple of years to, support a master's level program in a deep tech, science activity, and to give students access to equipment that might otherwise be very hard to access. So it's taking these devices out of dusty labs in the basement of the physics department of the university and putting them instead into a cloud that's accessible anywhere in the world and has all of the infrastructure around that to support them.
Gosh, Michael, I really feel like what you do is kind of a no-brainer offer.
Yeah, well, we like to think it. That's exactly the point, is to make this as accessible as possible. Quantum computers aren't that weird. It's just another computer, so it should be available in the cloud, on demand, cheap. Let's make it easy.
Yeah, but you have it stacked within AWS, and AWS being in the cloud, and they're, you guys are kind of leading, with everything. So this all makes sense. What a no-brainer offer. Oh my gosh, Michael.
If you need access to a quantum computer, we've got them. I'm the guy. We can help you out.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so talk to me more about who you are as in a person, your character. I would love to understand, because you're obviously you have an Aussie accent, and when we had coffee, you learned that I lived in Australia and for quite some time. So help me understand. Right? I know. So help me understand your story in before you cross the pond.
Sure. So I'm born and raised in Australia. I grew up in a very small town in country Queensland, so just north of Brisbane, Australia. I went to university there and did my degree in aerospace engineering in Brisbane. But very early on, a lot of my professional work was connected to the US. And so for the first part of my career working in the aerospace and defense sector, a lot of the programs that I worked on were joint Australian-US programs, or there'd be opportunities to come to the US and to work with partners and customers over here. And so I was very fortunate to have a lot of opportunities to come to the US in the first part of my career, and I loved it. I really, really enjoyed coming here and interacting with the community that's over here, and the sort of the vibrancy of entrepreneurialism and some of the big technology that happens. And so it was always an attractive place to be. Australia's wonderful. I consider it home. I very much want to keep that a part of my life. My family's back there. But I've always sort of described it as, if you want to play in the big leagues in technology, the big leagues are in America, in the US. And so I wanted to play in the big leagues. I wanted to work on the big projects and have an impact. And so that kind of necessitates moving across to the US for a little while. So for my startup, I moved to Washington, D.C. in 2013 to start that company, to be in the big leagues, to start that. We had a lot of our engineering work that happened back in Australia. So it was a joint Australian-US company at the time. And I think I told my parents that I'd be in the US for 2-3 years max, maybe, and then I'd come back. And it's now been 12, so I've been in the US 12 years, and now I've got an American wife, American daughters, an American mortgage, an American job here. So I don't know. I think I'm tied in for at least a little while yet.
That's fair to say. Got it. Okay. So help me understand. So you are also the vice president and board member of this incredible committee. Can you talk more about, can we transition and talk more about this? Because this is so important. When you and I met at the coffee shop, it was incredible to understand your passion. Like I really just saw like your whole eyes like like lit up, right? They were talking about this, and I could just see how important it is to you. And I really understand, because I think where we really bonded was understanding this standard of quality of life, camaraderie, and companionship, and a sense of belonging in a thriving community. So what the heck have you done, Michael?
Yeah, so with that lead in, it's going to be tough to to follow that. So yeah, I'm on the board of an organization in Seattle. It's called the Australian American Chamber of Commerce for the Pacific Northwest. And so the Australian American Chamber of Commerce is about building a community around Australians that are based here in the Pacific Northwest area and friends of Australia that are here. And it's amazing how many people with a connection to Australia live in Seattle and Portland and Idaho and even up to Vancouver, that are either from Australia like me or are connected like you and have spent a lot of time there and feel a sense of community with Australians. We think there's about 5,000 Australians and their families in the Pacific Northwest area, so it's a relatively large community of expats that have come across here. You can imagine that with companies like Amazon and Microsoft and Boeing and Starbucks and the other big tech firms here, it attracts a lot of talent from Australia to move here to the Pacific Northwest and call it home for a couple of years or a couple of decades or for the rest of their lives.
12 years?
Yeah, so that could be me. And so the Chamber of Commerce, its purpose is to connect those Australians together and help create a community around that, and help us not get so homesick with some activities, and to form bonds and share all of the good things from back home with each other, but then also help amplify and accelerate the business connections and intergovernmental connections between the Pacific Northwest and Australia. There's a huge amount of economic activity that goes on today between Washington State and Australia. And so we want to highlight that. It's a really, really good story to tell. And so the more that we can get people aware of that there's a lot of great business to be done, either from Australian companies coming here or for US companies seeing Australia as a market, we can help that. So that's the purpose of the organization, connecting people with some affinity to Australia, whether they're Australians or just love Australians, and the business community around that as well.
So then why Seattle, do you think?
Yeah, so there's already a huge amount of economic activity between the Pacific Northwest and Australia. So that includes direct trade that's going on. So whether that's from Amazon, Microsoft, Boeing, doing work in Australia and investing into Australia as a market for them, through to financial investment flowing in either direction. So the investor community in Australia and the large pension funds and like retirement funds in Australia investing into those companies in the Pacific Northwest, or there's a lot of high net worth individuals in the Pacific Northwest area, a lot of family offices that are investing into Australia as well, and so we need to help amplify those. And then a whole lot of like labor that crosses those boundaries as well. So there are Americans that go to Australia for a little while, a lot of Australians that come to the Pacific Northwest. And so there's already a really strong natural affinity between us from this region of the US back to Australia. So we need to amplify that. And it's being recognized at some high levels. So last year, the governor of Washington State and the Premier of Tasmania in Australia signed a sister state style agreement, a strategic cooperation agreement between the state of Washington and the state of Tasmania to recognize the amount of opportunity that's there and sort of amplify some of the activities that are going on. And that covers like some really interesting economic areas like agriculture and shipbuilding and Antarctic exploration and sort of like maritime industries through to like biofuels and green fuels as well. So, there's a huge amount of opportunity there. It's just beginning to be recognized. The organization that I'm part of is about amplifying that.
Wow, that's huge. I didn't know that. I mean, if Tasmania's on board, I mean, that says a lot. I remember when I was living in Sydney, like whenever Tasmania was like on board, it was pretty significant because of how conservative and how their due diligence is. So that's pretty significant, I think.
Yeah, and there's other big ones as well. Like to give you another example, so the Seattle Seahawks this year in March were given the rights to the media market in Australia to start to expand their reach as a team into the Australian market. And it's a semi-exclusive arrangement. There's only 4 teams in the NFL that have access, the rights from the NFL to access the Australian market, and the Seahawks are one of those.
Wow.
And so it's, there's an opportunity. The Seahawks are looking at playing either the first round or the second round of next year's season, so the 2026 season, to be played in Australia. So to bring the whole team across, play maybe in Melbourne or in Sydney or Brisbane at one of the big stadiums and host the first ever like full round NFL game in Australia to open up that market. So there's opportunities like that. Like how do we work with an organization like the Seahawks that has like such presence in Seattle and the chance to build awareness in Australia of opportunities in Seattle. It's super exciting.
Yeah, I can already think of partnerships with Qantas and Commonwealth Bank of Australia.
Exactly. And we all dream of a direct flight. You can't fly directly from Seattle to Australia yet, but the more of this stuff that we can do, the better chance that we're going to have of being able to fly directly from SeaTac to one of the East Coast airports.
Yes, let's get Michael to visit
your
family. Yeah, let's get that direct flight happening. Market expansion. Yeah. We all need to put a case together of a direct flight.
Yep.
Wow. Okay. And so who is part of, so help me understand the people who is part of the board with you and how you guys, like, what are these values that you guys were aligned with, that you guys are working together as a team?
Yeah, sure. So the board of the Australian American Chamber of Commerce for the Pacific Northwest, we've kind of come together over the last couple of years as a community. I think not everyone on the board is Australian. We've got folks on the board that are American and just have some affinity back to Australia and love Australia and love Australians. So they're a part of that. But we got people from across the business community. So there's me sort of representing Amazon. We've got a colleague, Claire Manson, who represents CSIRO. That's Australia's National Civilian Science Agency. She's embedded in Boeing here in Seattle as sort of there's a joint strategic research collaboration between CSIRO and Boeing that's been going on for about 20 years. So Claire is that representative that's based here in Seattle with Boeing. So she's on the board as well. We've also got representation from the accounting and tax community. You can imagine that one of the challenges of being an Australian in the US and the 5,000 or so Aussies that are over here, we need to deal with like accounting and tax problems as we have bank accounts on either side of the pond. So one of our board members is part of an accounting and tax advisory firm that helps that community do that sort of work. We've got other representatives from other like small businesses here that do trade in either direction. So they've either come across here to build their startups or or they sell products from Seattle back into Australia. So it's really quite it's a diverse board, but hopefully gives a good sort of representative cross-section of the Aussies that are based here in the Pacific Northwest.
Wow. Okay. So that is quite a substantial board, and it's interesting on how heavy the science side really is. So that's really great.
Yeah,
I'm impressed.
yeah. I think on the tech side, I think that's just a
Yeah.
that is a representation of the kind of activity that happens between Australia and Seattle. That it's very tech-heavy sort of trade. Yeah, the tech companies that are based here and what Australia's got to offer, it's focused on technology. So.
Yeah. Okay. So when you're talking about this, so this is what I love when talking about these things with you, because you get straight to the heart of commerce. And I feel like especially maybe the nature and maybe your personality and maybe just from your background and experience in the startup side of things, you're very direct when it comes to commerce. And I really appreciate that, honestly. It's like when it comes to not just like craftsmanship, but truly what does trade actually look like? How does economic the ecosystem, how does that work? Who is all involved? And all of that is very real. And I feel like the more real we can have those conversations as to like, because money just, it flows, currency flows, and that energy flows. So it's just like, okay, how do we get to work, do business with good people? How do we have strategic alliances? I feel like it was one of the highlights. And how do we how do we qualify what a good, healthy strategic alliance looks like? And I wonder if you have any conversations as to how you guys talk about it, whether it's with the other board members or with other highly engaged community members, of like, what does good look like?
Yeah, sure. So I think first of all, the fundamentals are so important. So, and what I mean by that is, if you're an American looking at Australia as a potential market, you're looking to know that it's a safe place to do business, that there's really strong, rule of law, IP protection, copyright protection, that the trade environment there is one that is going to behave in a way that is familiar to the US, and that there are safeguards in place to conduct business in a way that is very sensible, and that there are well enforced rules around the trade that supports that. And I think one of the reasons why Australia is so attractive as a market to American firms is that it is a very familiar sort of environment, similar kind of legal system, similar kind of protections that you get in the US market, a similar kind of culture for doing business. There are, of course, some differences, and Aussies are kind of peculiar in their own way, but out of all of the global markets, Australia is a very familiar place to do business for Americans. And so I think that's something that we try to highlight, that if you want to expand internationally and you're trying to think of that first market to go into, then Australia is a very easy first step to take into international expansion.
Okay. No, I love that so much, because usually people would be thinking about like UK and London, or okay, yeah, let's not bring the British in the conversation, but
and I think like if you looking in that direction to the world, also Australia is like a really natural kind of stepping off point into the rest of Asia.
yeah.
Well. So if you're looking at international expansion and relationships, then starting in Australia, where there's a very familiar environment and a very strong cultural affinity with the US, that's an easy starting point. And then you can start to look at other markets across Asia from there that you can expand into and go from there. So that's what we advocate for.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, like the PNW, and especially Seattle, I've always felt was the closest aligned with Sydney, to be honest, and like Australia in general. And so when I was living in Texas beforehand, and I definitely moved up here for diverse intelligence and a more similarity to when I lived in Sydney, Australia, and it was really important for me to be around certain kind of intelligence. And I think business intelligence is like one thing, that's for sure. But it was more about critical thinking. And then I think also the more relaxation on just kind of people chilling out a little bit, right? So like when I used to work in Australia, it was like we didn't care about like what you did before you got to work or after you got to work or whatever. We just want you to be out. Like we knew that we're doing really difficult work, really challenging work because we were kind of like an expat family. And so we really had each other's back. Like it was the best camaraderie, Michael, that I've ever experienced, honestly. And it didn't matter if people were coming from Paris, London, Singapore, like it didn't matter like where anyone was coming from anywhere, even New Zealanders. We all had a great time. Even the Kiwis, right? And we like had the greatest time because we're like, if you want to go spend time with your dog, or if you want to go surfing beforehand or go for a run or whatever it was, like we really just made sure that everyone had this kind of quality of life that you had your free time. It was like, we're going to do amazing work and then you're going to go off. Like, we want to get you out of here as soon as possible so you can enjoy your free time. And then when things were really hard, we had each other's back in ways that was more than their families, actually. And it was because of proximity. And so, like, I think it's just so incredible of how I've been hearing what you've been doing with the Australian community here and people who are friends to Australians here and with the 5,000 families here to make sure that they are feeling like they have a thread, right, that they can go through and feeling like there is a sense of belonging, that when things, especially like tax, things that are, you know, maybe an uncomfortable subject, right? But also really hard to navigate. It's kind of like if they always knew about like their super, right? Their 401k retirement equivalent. It's like, what does that mean in America? How can you translate this for me? It's all in English, but it's not in English, you know, kind of thing. And helping to understand, you know, how does the system work a little bit? Not just the jargon, but just how does that completely look like in their financial portfolio? What does that look like? But at the same time, how can we have a sense of that we know that we have each other's back? And I just feel like when I was living in Australia, it was just like everyone was so kind. But like they were really hardcore. Don't get me wrong. The intensity was like up the ante. But the intensity was about competition. It was like market competition. We all wanted to like be really proud of the work that we wanted to put together. And so when you're talking about commerce and trade here, and it's like, look, there's so much excitement of like, if there's one place that you want to think about market expansion outside of market localization, Australia's like right here. You're like, hi, I can connect you like a switchboard. We can connect you to XYZ. Like whether it's in aerospace, whether it's in other parts of science, which could look like healthcare, pharma, or like whatever it can be, or it could be about agriculture even, like all these things that you're talking about all feeds into economic development and everyone kind of can play a place there. So what are your thoughts about what do you want to see happen, Michael, with what's coming up? Because what's coming up is this event. Can you talk a little bit about this event that's coming around the corner?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that we help facilitate here in Seattle is that occasionally we have visitors from Australia come see us, which is wonderful. Like there are delegations that come across to Seattle to visit the companies that are based here and the universities and get a sense of, you know, the business opportunity here. So we have one such delegation coming next week here in Seattle. This is the American Chamber of Commerce from based in Australia. So this is the organization that helps connect Americans who are living and working in Australia. They have organized a delegation to come over to Seattle to visit us and to, you know, get a sense of the innovation and entrepreneurship and opportunities that exist in the PNW. So we're helping to show them a good time. Yeah, so we've got 16 delegates that are coming across, mostly from Melbourne, that are coming to Seattle next week. We've got a really fantastic program that we've helped put together for them at Amazon. They're going to go visit the Seahawks. They'll visit Salesforce, visit Boeing, and get a better understanding of the type of economic activity that's going on here in Seattle, and to be able to take those connections back home with them, to take those networks and ideas back home to Australia and think about how to apply those. So it's a really great opportunity for us to showcase what's going on in Seattle, to be able to welcome a group of business leaders from Australia to Seattle, and to help forge those connections. And it's not often that Seattle's at the top of the list for
Yeah.
come through. So a lot of these delegations will go to New York City or to San Francisco, but to be able to really hit this out of the park and give them a good experience and put Seattle right at the top of the list of regions that should be top of mind for Australian business leaders is a great opportunity. So we're excited to show them around next week.
I can't wait. Wrapping up here, can you share some stats? Because I just remember you had some really heavy hitting stats. I remember from our previous conversation, and it was stats about it was economic stats about Australians living here in America, and I don't know if any of them that you want to share.
Put me on the spot here to remember some numbers off the top of my head.
I don't know if there's any stats that you can share, because it's really interesting as to how passionate you are in the diplomatic relations and how you understand how it's interwoven with business, economics, how when creating deals, it really does matter in these strategic alliances and extending the opportunity, because it's a direct correlation to livelihoods. It's a direct correlation of someone's future, of can they see a future that they are able to do something amazing like you, Michael, where they're able to play big in the big leagues. They're able to explore not just technology, but the business opportunity that truly is endless.
The relationship between the US and Australia goes back a long, long way, and is an extremely strong relationship. So the amount of economic activity, the military alliance that exists, the trade that goes on between our two countries, that is a deep, deep relationship, and has a lot of opportunity embedded in that. The organization that I work with, so Australian American Chamber of Commerce, we're not representative of the government in any way. We represent the business community that's based here in the PNW, and the Aussies and their families that are also based here. But of course, we have a very strong relationship to the Australian consulate in San Francisco that looks after this area, to the Australian embassy in DC, and to Austrade. So Austrade being the official Australian government investment attraction agency that helps facilitate that work. They've got incredible stats on what that trade relationship looks like, and the amount of goods that go in either direction, the amount of capital that flows in either direction, the amount of human capital that goes in those directions as well, and that relationship. What we're trying to figure out is, so we know what the overall Australia-US relationship is, but what is the Washington State portion of that? What is the 1/50th equivalent of that? We know it's more than 1/50th. Of course, Washington is higher than, it's high on the list of US states that contribute to that overall trade relationship, but we don't know exactly what it is. You can imagine that California and New York and Texas are probably the top three in terms of trade with the US, but Washington State can't be too far behind. So how do we baseline that and get an understanding for the amount of trade that's going on, and then increase that work? And so that's something that we're working with Austrade on and trying to get a better understanding together of what's happening in Washington and a contribution either way. And so hopefully once we got that baseline, we understand some policy levers that we could influence, that'll grow over time. And the vision here is that in 10, 20, 30 years, that Seattle and this region are viewed by the Australian business community as one of the top destinations, that businesses here view Australia as a great place to go. And we've got many direct flights going in the direction as well, so that we can feel connected.
Michael, you want us to be at the top of the list so you have more friends?
Yeah, I love living here. It's been a great place, and I want my family to come over more often. I want to be able to head back home and have an excuse to build on everything I've done so far.
Oh my God, Michael, I love it so much. Thank you so much for sharing. I mean, it's so lovely because to hear someone like you to be really passionate about why you're building a community, sharing all the different sides of it as well, being honest about it and transparent. I think that's just really beautiful. So thank you so much for your time and sharing and being really down to earth.
Hey, see, you're an honorary Australian. We Aussies got to stick together and keep the down-to-earth nature and build on that nature.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Michael, thank you so much again.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Oh my God.